Oh my gosh. Okay, hey guys, it's Jet888 here. It's June 4th. I'm outside right now, but I'm gonna go inside and I want to show you just things I've seen regarding the Federal Reserve. Azul, show us your better side, please. Okay, so last night I published the one about, let's see, what was it? This is bad for our republic. Video that went a little bit into the WHO and stuff like that, and the tranny stuff. And I've been working on this other video about the other WHO. It's the White House Office Incorporated. And so I've started looking at that, and it just got deeper into the Federal Reserve and who owns the White House and just all that stuff. So anyhow, I wanted to look a little bit deeper into this Federal Reserve Board of Governors, which I am at. Let's see, which I think I'm at 6 minutes and 45 seconds into this video, and I'm, instead of just cutting it in and making it part of this, I'm just going to show you something that I found real quickly here. So when I was looking at the Federal Reserve Bank, it stated that there were 12. Where was it? There are 12 in total. And when I say 12, so it's a map of 12 Federal Reserve districts with the 12 Federal Reserve districts enumerated. Remember that word? Well, I don't know if I've covered it yet, but yeah, I think in my last video, enumerated, like enumeration is same as mountaineer. Enumerated in black circles, and the 12 Federal Reserve banks marked as black squares. Branches within each district are marked as red circles. The Washington, D.C. headquarters is marked with a star. Of course, it's marked with a star. Also, the word star, if you look at gematria, is also equivalent to the word phone. So with a star enclosed in a black circle. And here's the map. Let's see if I can make that a little bit bigger. So here are the geographic boundaries of all the Federal Reserve banks. And isn't that interesting? There's no bank in California, but there is a black square, the black box. And here you've got your star with DC. But anyhow, so I was looking at closer to the Federal Reserve banks, and it states here there are 12 in total, one for each of the 12 Federal Reserve districts that were created by the Federal Reserve Act. But who created that? So the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. The banks, now banks aren't, but people are who run the banks. Banks are jointly responsible for implementing the monetary policies set forth by the Federal Open Committee and are divided as follows. And we saw this in the map. So Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Richmond, Atlanta, Chicago, St. Louis, Minneapolis, Kansas City, as in Oz, Dallas, and San Francisco, which is where the WHO organizes, and that's was in my video a little bit. I touched on that a little bit yesterday. I just happened to find this picture on the 12 Federal Reserve banks, just pictures of these buildings. There's St. Louis, Chicago, down one there's Kansas City, Minneapolis, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Richmond, Atlanta, Dallas. Isn't that interesting? They kind of all look alike. San Francisco. San Francisco's looking a little top heavy there. No, I guess that's just the building behind it. I don't know. That's weird. That's Azul. So these are taken in 1936, and you know what? Interesting, because you flip that little 36 around and you get your 93, like Thelema, the Aleister Crowley. And this says several policy questions have arisen with these institutions, including the degree of influence by private interests, the balancing of regional economic concerns, the prevention of financial panics, and the type of reserves used to back currency. There's nothing backing our currency. It's debt. It's debt, what is backing our currency right now. But anyhow, back to my program. So regarding the legal status, it says the reserve banks are organized as self-financing corporations and empowered by Congress to distribute currency and regulate its value under policies set by the Federal Open Market Committee and the Board of Governors. And I'm covering that in this video right here. So this states their corporate structure reflects the concurrent interests of the government and the member banks, but neither of these interests amounts to outright ownership. Legal cases involving the Federal Reserve banks have concluded that they are private, but can be held or deemed as governmental, depending on the particular law issue or law at issue. And what's funny is, you know, they're the private. Remember those Operation Warp Speed, public-private partnership, the PPPs. So I guess it just depends on what case is going on as to whether they're going to look at it as private or government. But it says in United States Shipping Board Emergency Fleet Corporation versus Western Union Telegraph Company, the U.S. Supreme Court stated, instrumentalities like the national banks or the Federal Reserve banks in which there are private interests are not departments of the government. They are private corporations in which the government has an interest, just like the big pharmaceutical companies that we've seen lately, with the Department of Defense kind of calling the shots. Let's see, I haven't read this, but let's try it here. The United States has an interest in the Federal Reserve banks as tax-exempt federally created instrumentalities whose profits belong to the federal government, but this interest is not proprietary. And I guess there's a court case, Kennedy C. Scott versus Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, in the Wayback Machine on May 17, 2010. So proprietary is relating to an owner or ownership, as in the company has a proprietary right to the property. So if you look at that in software, it says proprietary software is software that is deemed within the free and open source software community to be non-free because its creator, publisher, or other rights holder or right holder's partner exercises a legal monopoly by modern copyright and intellectual property law to exclude the recipient from freely sharing the software or modifying it, and in some cases, as is the case with some patent encumbered and EULA bound software, from making use of the software on their own, thereby restricting their freedoms. So that's interesting a little bit. So proprietary is basically like an owner, a proprietor. According to Merriam-Webster, a proprietary process is a manufacturing process that others are forbidden to use, and a proprietary trademark is a name that only the owner can use. So that basically the United States has an interest in the Federal Reserve banks as tax-exempt, federally created instrumentalities whose profits belong to the federal government, but this interest is not proprietary. So maybe that's the interest is for the people. I still don't really comprehend. I'm sure someone out there does though. This one case said the reserve banks are not federal instrumentalities for purposes of the FTCA, that's the Federal Tort Claims Act, but are independent, privately owned, and locally controlled corporations. So the reserve banks, I guess that's the Federal Reserve banks, right? They are locally controlled corporations. Okay, so I'm going to go down here real quick. Some banks also possess branches, with the whole system being headquartered at the, what's that, Eccles building in Washington, D.C. Eccles? I don't know how you say that. So here it is, the Mariner S. Eccles Federal Reserve Board building. There's the entrance. There's your foggy bottom, which I showed on the video that I'm getting ready to post also. But this Eccles Federal Reserve Board building houses the main offices of the Board of Governors, which I'm covering in my other video, of the United States Federal Reserve System. Oh, so this just says the building was named after Mariner S. Eccles. Let's look at him. Yeah, he looks trustworthy. He was an American economist and banker who served as the 7th chairman of the Federal Reserve from 1934 to 1948. He continued to serve as a member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors until 1951. But the building was named after him under President Roosevelt by act of Congress on October 15, 1917. Previously, it had been known as the Federal Reserve Building. See how they changed their names? They kind of change the names when they think people are onto them. And they changed that name in 1982, I guess. So that's sort of interesting. 86 years ago. Steel beam. Okay. So here's a little bit more of a clear map. 12 Federal Reserve districts. I'll show this to you if anyone's interested, but it's color-coded. I like colors. And this states that the 12th district, the Seattle branch, serves Alaska, and the San Francisco Bank serves Hawaii. And in February of 1996, it says the Board of Governors revised the branch boundaries of the system in February 1996. So I wanted to know who was on the Federal Reserve Board, or the Fed, the Federal Open Market Committee. That's the FOMC. Federal Open Market Committee consists of 12 members, the 7 members of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, and the President, I'm skipping this other page, but the President of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and 4 of the remaining 11 Reserve Bank presidents who serve 1-year terms on a rotating basis. The rotating seats are filled from the following 4 groups of banks, and it gives that. I'm going to send you, I'll give you the link, but I just want to see the structure of the FOMC. And I was looking at the committee members. So here's Jerome H. Powell. He's the Board of Governors chair. So I went to look at him. And this guy, you know when they have the tight lips like that, it means you're not saying something. Well, not all the time, but that can be an indication that you're kind of biting your lip. You're not saying something. But it talks about how he had these long terms in here. He's reappointed to the board and sworn in on June 16, 2014 for a term ending in January 31st, 2028. So he's going to be in here January 2028. But before his appointment to the board, Mr. Powell was a visiting scholar at Bipartisan Policy Center in Washington, D.C., where he focused on federal and state fiscal issues. And then down here, I want to show you, so he was also a partner at the Carlyle Group between 1997 and 2005. He also served as Assistant Secretary as an Undersecretary to U.S. Department of Treasury under President George Bush, with responsibility for policy on financial institutions. But anyhow, I wanted to go look at this Carlyle Group. So this states the Carlyle Group is a multinational private equity alternative asset management and financial services corporation based in the United States with $376 billion, that made me stutter, of assets under management. It specializes in private equity, real assets, and private credit. It's one of the biggest mega funds in the world. So it's a public company traded as NASDAQ CG Russell 1000 component. Anyhow, I wanted to show you this. So I go to the Carlyle Group. I look around a little bit more. That's their little logo, I guess. And I see this, June 1st, 2023, Carlyle snaps up stake in 517 unit development project in Gowanus for $100 million. And here's an artist rendering, it says. But down here, it says rendering of 267 Bond Street. 267 Bond Street. So I went to look at the number 267. Here's kind of a little map overall. Here's New York. Right there's Empire State Building, and you head south here. There's that red, see the red thing there? There's the Statue of Liberty. And it's interesting, look how it looks like they're really tearing it apart here, but there's Richardson Electrical Services, there's Bond Street, and you know what kind of got me a little bit was the Bond, like James Bond, and Google is Goo Gel, and that has something to do with Bond, like 007 is Goo. I know that's probably weird sounding, but so there's Bond. Just look at the 007, and 7 is G, and then you've got the GOO, and that's just Goo. So when you look at also Google, that's Goo Gel. And it just makes me think of whatever it is that they put into those shots. That hydrogel or something. But Bond is also machine, and I covered machine last night. It's also bacon, and I'm in the middle of trying to do a thing on the LAPD, which is bacon and, you know, pigs and sow and all that stuff, but that's another story. But Bond is 35 in simple gematria. This is not a big deal, but it's 35, and it's 53 in Hebrew is the word bank. And bank is also hell, which is 53 and 222 and 37. But the Carlisle group bought that building in Gowanus, and it's at 267 Bond Street. So this is the site that shows, and we saw that overhead. Look at that. You got your 666 there. How nice. So I just went real quickly and looked at the numbers 267 in gematria. And it's the Lord is 267. And remember what they say about the Lord? Well, not really the Lord, but God. And here's John 1:1. There's your 11. So, but the Bible says in King James and all these other Bibles, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It was God. The Word was God. And 267 is also free speech. And if you add these up, there's your 9, and there's your 9. So it's kind of weird. There's 267, 9, 9. And you have, if you add 267, the 7 and 2 is 9 plus 6 is what 9 total is 15, and then 5 plus 1 is 6. So when you reduce it, you've got 6, 9, 9. It's just sort of weird to me, but free speech, that's the word, free, the word, free speech. And also part of that free speech down in the Jewish and simple gematria, it's hidden codes. 222, 54, and 9. There's your 9 and 9 again, but there's your 222. And remember the FOMC, the term monetary policy, refers to the actions undertaken by central banks such as Federal Reserve to influence the availability and cost of money and credit to help promote national economic goals. And here, where'd that go? And the FOMC, see that? Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC. It consists of 12 members, the 7 members of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. I think I read this to you earlier. The President of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and the 4 of the remaining 11 Reserve Bank presidents. But anyhow, so FOMC, and there's your gematria. FOMC is 2222. Which is the same as hidden codes. They hide everything. I wonder what, let's see, 699 would be. Let's go look at that. Or it should be 996 because they flip everything around. So let's go look at 996. That FOMC is also Holy Bible, is what its numerology is also equal to. The Holy Bible. And we're also talking about the free speech because that's also the Lord. The Word was God. Well, 996 in English gematria is Twin Towers. And 996 is also the secret code decode. And 996 is also Charles Philip Arthur George. And remember him, Prince of Wales? Remember he said, Charles Philip George, he said when he dies, he wants to come back as a virus. Do you guys remember that comment he made, that quote? And anyhow, I thought it was disturbing. But just know there aren't such things. But remember the numerology for FOMC is also Holy Bible. The anagram for Holy Bible is also by biohell. So I think that's kind of weird that 996. when you reduce the free speech numerology there, it ends up being either 699 or 996, however you want to look at it. If I just happen to look at that Carlisle group, the one that they, Jerome Powell, the chair of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, current truth is also 996. And this is just a little weird. The Jerome H. Powell, his name, when I look at the anagram, just one is Jew Loom Helper. And loom is an apparatus for making fabric by weaving yarn or thread. Remember that, the lives, what is it? Oh, the lives we weave when we, what is it? Something we weave when we lie to deceive. What's that saying? Oh yeah, that is it. So, oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. I've heard too that, oh, what a tangled web we weave when we lie to deceive. And lying is a form of words. And it's funny because the Carlisle group, when I look at the numerology and simple gematria, it comes up. First one on the list there is lying hypocrite. It's funny, it's also Silicon Valley Bank. When I think of a tangled web, I think of that story, that children's story, Charlotte's Web, where she was trying to, her name is Fern, and she was trying to save, actually, the spider's name was Charlotte, and she was trying to warn people, and she was trying to save the pig, Wilbur. Do you remember that? She was trying to save that pig, Charlotte the Web. So she would weave words into her web to warn people. And one thing about funny, that Charlotte's Web, when I just think of that as the web we weave. So here's Charlotte's Web, looking at the anagram. So in Charlotte's Web, I see the word Hebrew and Hebrew L, but I also got this as an anagram, is beware the clots, and also beware text lot is the anagram for Charlotte's Web, or the possibilities. So beware the clots, beware text lot. Another anagram also is clue at beer shot, and clue could be CLUE, as in like a hint. So they're trying to warn people at the beer shot. It's also the worst cable, and when I think of that, I think of the 5G. So anyhow, those are just some strange little things I found. I don't know if I showed you guys these yet, or that I made this video. I don't think it's out yet, but regarding that beware the clots. And I saw this in my local area paper. It says pet of the week, and it's Wilbur. I thought that was funny. So Wilbur, and it says meet Wilbur. This little piggy will go wee 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 straight to your heart, which some of those needle crafting did go to some people's heart. And Wilbur, that little pig at Charlotte's Web, remember that little pig? And what do you call a pig? You call him a sow. And when I look at the word sow, it is in gematria, you've got the last 3, 42, and 57, and that's also vaccine. Isn't that kind of strange? And also Bible code. Anyhow, as in the word was God, but vaccine and sow. So we'll end it on that note, because I can go forever on this stuff. But thanks, Charlotte. Thanks for warning us. And isn't that funny too? Because the book, the price in the US is $6.99. Oh, and sorry, I just have to quickly end it on this note. So the first chapter of Charlotte's Web is called Before Breakfast. And here's just the first paragraph or two. It says, "Where's Papa going with that axe?" said Fern. Remember, that's the little girl. Her name is Fern. "So where's the Papa going with the axe?" said Fern to her mother as they were sitting the table for breakfast. "Out to the hog house," replied Miss Arable. Arable. "Some pigs were born last night. I don't see why he needs an axe," continued Fern, who was only 8. "Well," said her mother, "one of the pigs is a runt. It's very small and weak, and it will never amount to anything. So your father, he has decided to do away with it." So right there, her father is practicing eugenics, just like Bill Gates. Okay, guys, I'm so sorry. I always do this. I just want to finish with this one more thing. I just kind of saw this. So I was looking for the synonyms for bank. That means the things are kind of the same. And I'm just looking at the words. So there's bank, and then the word there is reservoir. See that? The one the little fingers pointed to is reservoir. And of course there's the reserve. So you think of also the Federal Reserve, but there's reservoir. And what do you think of when you think of the reservoir? Like water, right? So here's looking at the gematria, which I always do, and people don't know, they don't believe this really, but to me there is a numerical value because words have frequencies. There's a frequency to our words, and it has a numerical value. So here's the word Federal Reserve. Here's the numerology, 1086. That's what I'm going to look at right now. And so I go to look at Federal Reserve to see what else is numerically equivalent to it. And there's the word water. So Federal Reserve, there's your water, and water and Federal Reserve, they're both about currency, right? Current, the water has a current, and Federal Reserve, it's a currency, the money. And here's also Ark of Covenant, the Ark, like the Ark was on the water, and that's also on the current. And kind of playing on the very last part of my video with the eugenics, with the little pig that was going to be killed because he was too small. So there's the word Holy Royal Gene, like the blue bloods. And of course, if you put an S on the end of it, there's your Federal Reserves, and Federal Reserve in simple and English gematria. So Federal Reserves is waters. So I thought that was just interesting. Okay, for now. Bye, guys.